Hello students, in this session we are going to start first chapter of your science book, NCERT science book 8th class. First chapter we are going to start in this session. In this chapter we have to study the crop production and management. Firstly we will understand what are crops, because we have to study the productions of the crops in this chapter. And thereafter, we will understand the management, why management is required in the field of crop protection. Firstly, we will understand the crops. What are crops? Because this chapter starts with this term. Crops means when the food producing plants, single type of the plants, single kind of the plants are grown in field in large scale. Then those plants together called as crops. Again, I am repeating the definitions of this term. When single kind of plants, food producing the plants are grown in large scale, they are called as crops. Now we have to discuss why the crops are grown. What is the requirement to grow the crops? Because we human beings, apart from the other living being, requires food to survive, to get energy. We know in previous classes certainly you have learned all the living beings require food to get energy, to survive. So human being, being the part of the living world, also require food for survival as well as to perform their various type of day-to-day work. Apart from the physical works, we know that number of biological activities are continuously going inside the body of the living being. As we are also living being, so number of biological functions are also going inside our body. So we require energy always. That energy comes from the food. And foods are only produced by the plant, we know. Only green plant of this planet can produce food, we know. So the green plants, particularly green plants, are called as universal producer. Universal producer, because only green plants are producing various type of the food material by the process of photosynthesis. In previous classes certainly you have learned these all things. You have learned regarding photosynthesis. In first chapter, in 7th class, there is a nutrition chapter. Certainly you have learned in that chapter regarding autotrophs and heterotrophs. So only the green plants are the autotrophs. No other living being of this world can produce food like plants. All the living beings are heterotrophs. They are directly and indirectly dependent upon the green plants of this planet. So to produce the food, to get the food, the human beings are growing the crops in their fields. Here we have to discuss the history of the food production, history of the growing the crops, in the civilized human society. About 10,000 BC before, the human beings were nomadic. आदि मानव, मनुष्य जो है आदि मानव था. They were wandering in jungle here and there in search of food. They were nomadic. Basically, they were hunter. They were hunting the wild animals for their food, to meet their जो है कि food requirement. In the course of time of the civilization, they started thinking to grow the crops, to grow the fruits, plants, so that they can settle their life, they can live their जो है कि settle life. And as the God has given the power of perception, God has given जो है कि mind to the human being. So with the help of their mind, they could able to think how to make their life comforts and how to grow the crops. By chance, one of the human being could find the seed. He could be able to understand how the seeds are जो है कि growing into the seedlings or seed and plants, and that plants can grow the fruits and some grains. So by the discovery of the seeds, the human being started growing the crops. That was the advent, that was the start of the production of the crops. This is the history. So now we understood the history, how the human being started growing the crops to gain various type of the grains, various type of fruits and other plant products also, useful plant products also, like fibers, oil producing crops. So here firstly we will जो है कि classify the crop on the basis of the product. First, the food product, that is the cereal. Cereals like जो है कि paddy, maize, these are the major part of our food. From paddy crops, we are getting rice, wheat. These are the major part of our food, and they are called as cereals. After the cereals, there is pulses. This is the second जो है कि major part of our food. Third, vegetables. Thereafter, fruits. And apart from the food crops, there are fiber producing जो है कि crops also. Fiber. This is the first category. Food producing जो है कि crops. Second, fiber producing. Fiber producing crops. Third, oil producing. Crops. Oil producing crops such as जो है कि mustard, cotton, soybean, etc. Fiber producing cotton, jute, hemp, etc. So these are the classification on the basis of the grains or the products which are gained from the various type of the crops. Now, on the basis of season, on the basis of time of the growing the crops in our country, we can classify the crops into two categories. First is Kharif crop. Second is Rabi crop. These terms are very important point of examination. First, on the basis of product, we seen here the types of the crops. Now, on the basis of season or timing, you may tell timing, seasons or timing for growing the crops in India. In context of our country, we are discussing the production of crops only. So on the basis of season or the timing or the season in which the various type of the crops are grown, we can classify the crops mainly in two types. First, Kharif crops. Second is Rabi. These are Arabic terms. In Arabic language, the Kharif means rainy and Rabi means winter. You note down. The crops which are grown in rainy season is starting from June to September. Harvesting is done in September and sowing of the seeds is done in the month of June. So this period from June to September, the crops which come in this category, Kharif crops, they are grown in the rainy season. And sowing is done in June and harvesting is done in September. This is the period. So such type of crops are called as Kharif crop. Example, main crop paddy in our country. Thereafter cotton. So these are the main two crops of Kharif. Rabi crop, winter. The crops which are grown in winter season is starting from October to March. Harvesting is done in the month of March and sowing is done in the month of October. So this category or these type of the crops are called as Rabi. Rabi means, just I told you, Rabi means winter. The crops which are grown in, again I am repeating the definition of this type of the crops. The crops which are grown in winter season is starting from October to March are called as Rabi. Main Rabi crops are wheat, pulses, gram, and these are the main crops. So by this way, we have studied the types of the crops in this session. Next session, we will discuss the various type of the practices, agricultural practices, which are done in India, done in our country to grow the various type of crops in the fields. We have to study in this chapter the different type of the practices, starting from the preparing the soil, because soil is the main. Soil is the ground where the plants are grown, where the crops are grown. So starting from the preparing the soil, thereafter sowing. Next जो है कि step is sowing. Thereafter mixing the manures and fertilizers. After that irrigation. And after irrigation, harvesting is done. After harvesting, threshing, winnowing, and there ultimately जो है कि the grains are stored. So these are the different steps of agricultural practices which we have to study in this chapter. So in next session, we will study the various type of the different type of the agricultural practices, step wise practices, है ना? And in this, by this way, I am concluding my lecture, है ना? In next section, see you. Thank you very much.